I've chosen 10 things that I think people would find very useful to know about their own plumbing systems. Some may not apply to you. For instance, number 3 is about gravity systems, number 10 is about manholes, and this one's applied to you if you live in a flat. But you may be interested to know about these anyway, and perhaps help a friend. Everything I discuss in more detail in my other videos. First of all, mains water, you've got to know how you can turn the water off if you have to. If you're in a flat, find out how you turn your water off. The stop tap may be in a cupboard. I was called out to a job, water pouring into the flat below. Commissioner was away for the weekend. Nobody knew how to turn the water off. I had an emergency on my hands. Most houses have their own public stop tap outside the property, but there are some shared ones, shared with a neighbour, or maybe shared with a few neighbours. So you need to find out. Ask your neighbour if they're not sure, and if they can't help, call your water company, and they'll be likely to come round, show you where it is, and check if it's working. Have a look at the pavement outside, perhaps in line with the front door or the garage, and you'll see perhaps a square plate like this for the older ones, or a circular plastic plate for the new ones. Get a screwdriver and lever both these off, put the screwdriver in there. And inside the chamber, it may be quite deep, you can't see down, get your torch out. It might be filled with water. I would siphon it out. This is one I'll be talking about later for blockages. If your chamber is always filling with water and you've got one of the modern plastic ones, contact your water supply company, because they should be able to give you one which keeps the water out. If you've got earth and it tends to be very soft, maybe earthworms have put it there, get leather gloves or perhaps kitchen plastic gloves, soak it up, put a second one on top, just scoop it out until you can see your stop valve. There are 3 main types of stop valve. First of all, this type looks like a typical stop valve with what's called a crutch head to turn the water off, to turn clockwise for off, anti-clockwise for on. There's also stop valves with a square head, and there's a modern type which you'll have a plastic key for insert into a hexagonal hole at the bottom. If your controls are a bit out of reach, you'll need a stop valve key to turn the water off. This type will be sitting in your the stop valve chamber, maybe in the socket or maybe just at the side. If it's missing, phone your water company, they'll replace it for you. This type with the crutch handle, you get a stop valve key like this. This is the one I use. They're not expensive, £4 from Tool Station, this one. And the other type for the square head valves, like this, you can either get separately, or you can get what's called a universal stop valve key. Again, not very expensive, perhaps £11 from Tool Station. Indoor stop valves should be the easiest to use because they're at home, but because they tend to be at the back of the kitchen sink, behind loads of junk, behind washing machines, under the floor somewhere, just inaccessible. They're not touched from year to year. They get stiff, and even with a tool, it's not easy to move them. You can try loosening this gland nut at the top, putting in some lubricant, but the lubricant usually won't get far enough into the mechanism to make any difference. So the best thing, if you can, is to turn the water off out in the street, get this changed. New ones cost about the £5. A useful tool is a short crutch key with a handle which gives you good leverage for turning the handle of your stop valve, and it's got 2 pegs on which have another use as well, I'll talk about in a moment. Incidentally, don't worry if you do turn this and the handle comes off, water's not going to come pouring out, and even if the spindle breaks, all that happens is it's just jammed in an open position, and again, to turn the water off outside and get this changed. You also need to know about turning your hot water off. If you've got an unvented system, you may have a lever like this, and turn it. It follows a convention, clockwise for off, and the handle is across the direction of the pipe, and anti-clockwise back on, and it's in line with the pipe. If you've got a gravity system, you'll have one or more of these in your airing cupboard. Have a look for the one fitted to the downpipe which comes from the cold water tank into the bottom of the hot water cylinder. This turns the hot water off because it stops cold water going down into the bottom of the cylinder and pushing hot water out of the top. These tend not to be touched from year to year. They get very stiff, and you'll need a tool, a grip or something to get them moving. This mini crutch tool that I've just mentioned has a couple of pegs on the end. So in addition to being able to turn the stop valve handle, these pegs fit into this red handle, and again the handle gives you good leverage to get it moving. Now just start getting it moving a little bit, then more and more, and generally with gate valves, once they're moving, they carry on being able to be moved by hand, and you don't need a tool anymore. But of course you should be giving them occasional turn, maybe once or twice a year, just to keep them moving. Once you find out which controls turn the hot water off, label them just right on the wall beside the valve, or just write on a piece of cardboard, piece of string, tie it round, so everyone knows straight away where the hot water turn off is. If you've got a combi boiler, you'll know that if you turn the cold water mains off, it turns the hot water off as well. But the combi needs to be working at a certain pressure to be able to produce hot water, and if the pressure goes down to half a bar or less, it'll just stop working altogether. So you need to know how to repressurize your boiler, and if you have a look at the control panel, you may see a dial with a needle pointing. It should be into a green zone. There should be a little part of it, color green, starts at 1 bar pressure. You may instead have a digital dial with a reading up which tells you the pressure in bar. And if your pressure gets too low, it's time to top it up. Have a look at your manual if you're not sure how it's done. But if you have a look under the controls panel, and you may see something which looks like this, which is called a filling loop with a valve at each end. You open both valves, and that lets water at mains pressure flow into your system. If you've got a Worcester boiler, you'll have a plastic key like this. You insert into the boiler underneath, turn it to get the water on, and you may just have a couple of handles which you turn, and that lets the water flow in. Your manual or one of my videos will tell you how to do this. One thing the manual won't tell you though is what to do if there's a bit too much pressure in the system. If you put a bit too much water in, or something not quite right with the control, how do you drop the pressure? You take the pressure off by one of your radiators. Have a look downstairs by your radiator on one of the pipes. It may just be apart from the radiator, but something like this, called a drain valve, a spanner to open this, and water will come out here. You can put a hose on into a bucket or take it outside. If you want to take off the pressure completely from the central heating system, it'll only take about a bucket at most of water. So if you repressurize your system a bit more than you need, you will only need to take off a litre or so. This one's for people with gravity systems. If you've got a cold water tank in the loft, hot water cylinder in a cupboard, or if you're in a flat, you'll have a combination cylinder in the cupboard with a hot water cylinder and a little cold water tank above it. Your hot water taps will be supplied by these tanks at low pressure, but you really ought to know what other facilities in your property are supplied under low pressure too. Turn off your cold water mains and see what doesn't work anymore. It might be your bathroom toilet, for instance. Also the bath cold tap, and maybe even the basin cold tap. I know some people who had their family round at Christmas. They all had a shower Christmas morning. It drained the cold water tank in the loft. It couldn't refill fast enough to cope with the demand, so it emptied the pipework. When it tried to refill, it got an airlock, which meant the water wouldn't flow anymore. So Christmas Day, no more showers, no bath either, no hot water around the house, and no toilet working. So how much does it cost to get a sober plumber out on Christmas Day to sort out your plumbing? Well, I'm not surprised they wouldn't tell me. So the conclusion is, it's a good idea to change the mains pressure if you get the opportunity. And if you change, for instance, from gravity to combi system, all your water, hot and cold, will be changed to mains. and same with unvented. And as far as the tank in your loft is concerned, if it might be on the small side on occasion, you can get either a bigger one or get a second one and make a direct connection, and that'll increase your capacity. A point about your loft tanks: are they accessible? Can you see them? Have you got a light in your loft? You'll have two tanks, a larger one to supply cold water, and the smaller one will be for your central heating.